Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be discussing how to navigate the waters of kink and BDSM as an asexual person. I do have another video where I talk specifically about asexuality and BDSM in terms of like, does it happen, and like my experience as an asexual person and all of that stuff. So if you're interested in learning about that, link to that video down below, as well as Morgan Thorne's video about asexuality and kink. Definitely recommend checking both of those out. But I wanted to specifically make something that was not necessarily explaining my asexuality to other people or how that has worked out in kink, but talking more about if you are an asexual person or have an asexual partner, or just want to know in general how this is done, how to navigate coming into BDSM and being a kinky person, and how does that mesh with your identity as an asexual person? How is that received? How do you handle things maybe a little bit differently than other people who are involved in the lifestyle? How do you communicate that? All that stuff. So if that sounds interesting, awesome, you're at the right video. Hopefully you find it interesting. And while I am filming this, it is Asexual Awareness Week. Hi, be aware, I am an asexual. I probably will not be able to get this up before the end of Asexual Awareness Week, but you know, I filmed it during the week, so I guess that counts. I hope, maybe. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started with the actual video topic. So first things first is, if you are an asexual person, obviously you probably are aware there is a wide spectrum of asexuality. Myself personally, I am gray A, and I am also sex ambivalent, so I don't frequently experience sexual attraction, and I also don't really care one way or another about sex. There was also a time period where I was very much sex repulsed, like probably until I was about 19 or 20. I was extremely sex repulsed, did not want to even think about it at all, just found it completely disgusting. So if you are a sex repulsed person, I totally know where you're coming from. It just happened to be, for me, something when I learned more about sexuality in like an educational way, it got less like scary to me outright, and I ended up just kind of being like, it's fine, I guess, I don't really care. And I'm not trying to say as a sex repulsed person that you would need to do that in order to be able to engage in BDSM, because that's not true. I'm just trying to give you guys some perspective on like how that happened in my life and like what that process was like for me. Now, I'm assuming one of the big questions is going to be, as an asexual person, how do you talk about that in BDSM? Is that going to be something that people in the community are going to judge you for? Is it going to make it harder for you to find play partners? Is it going to be more difficult to find people who are like-minded, who understand your sexuality? Is it going to make scenes awkward and negotiation awkward? You know, how do you talk about it or bring it up? And what I would say to this is, if you are asexual, or any kind of sexuality for that matter, doesn't really actually change that much, thankfully. BDSM and kink and all that stuff are very, very open. They honestly don't necessarily care what your sexuality is. Like, yeah, if somebody is a lesbian and they only play with other women because they're a lesbian, and you are a cis male, that's going to be, you know, a problem for you maybe, but otherwise people don't generally care who you're sexually attracted to in BDSM and have that be a factor for friendship or play or anything like that, because for most people who are in the community and have it as part of their lifestyle and not as like a bedroom only thing, for the majority of them, this is something that they keep separate. Like, sexual attraction is here, and like people I play with in BDSM is here. It's seen more like a hobby that you do with people that you trust, and whether or not you're sexually attracted to them may or may not be a factor. Obviously, there are going to be some people for whom sexual attraction and sexual energy during play is very important, but if you're an asexual person and you go to a dungeon or you're at a munch or something like that, and you mention that you're asexual, or for some reason it comes up, it's not going to be an issue. People aren't going to be like, well, they're like, why are you doing kink? Like, nobody's going to shove you out of the room because you are an asexual person. On that topic, however, I understand, especially for people who have not ever been to a dungeon before and have no idea what to expect, or been to a munch, or been around kinky people, especially if you're more on the sex repulsed side of asexuality. you're gonna be worried, like, how sexual is this gonna be? Like, are people gonna be, like, having orgies everywhere, and how many, are there gonna be genitals in my face, and, like, what's gonna happen? Like, am I expected to be naked? And, like, what is it gonna be like? How sexual it's gonna be? And I think part of that comes from the fact a lot of times people refer to BDSM clubs as sex clubs, but I think you will be surprised to note that actually at a lot of dungeons, penetrative intercourse is not allowed. So check out your local dungeon's rules to see if that's the case. There are some dungeons where sex is allowed with protection or with advance notice to the DMs, but even in places where that is allowed, I would say it's quite rare. And again, I'm just speaking about my own local community and dungeons I've been to. I would say that 90 to 95% of the scenes I have witnessed, even if they might be nude or involve various states of undress, they don't generally have very explicit sexual intercourse. If you are worried about going into a scene, going into a dungeon, and there being sex present, obviously talk with the event coordinators first. There are certain parties and certain dungeons where sex is going to be more or less common, or different levels of sex are allowed or not. In particular, if you're going to an event that's geared for pet play or DDLG, a lot of the times those are framed as being non-sexual, because for a lot of people, involving sex in their pet play or in their DDLG is considered to be like its own form of edge play. It's dark age play or dark pet play, and so those normally, if they happen, they're in a separate room or they're not allowed at that particular event at all. As well, when people do have sex at dungeons, most of the time it's not like out in the middle of the floor and like a huge orgy, unless it's at a house party and people have like explicitly negotiated for that. It's usually going to be in a separate room that has its own curtains and mattresses and everything. So at the very least, the sight of it will be obscured, and whether or not that is going to be uncomfortable for you or not is totally up to you. Now, I did say a lot of times there's going to be nudity. You're going to see genitals, you're going to see breasts and other parts of people's bodies, and I don't necessarily want to specify which ones because you can probably imagine it for yourself, but you will see them. And generally speaking, it's, for me personally, it was actually really like healthy to be able to see like just natural bodies in a completely like neutral state. Like, it wasn't like they were being sexual towards me and their bodies were not like being sexualized in any ways. They just like were that way. And for me personally, that was actually really helpful, and was something that kind of allowed me to transition from being completely sex repulsed to being more like sex ambivalent, to where it's not necessarily like naked bodies that disgust me, but it's just like the acts of sex that I'm not like super duper okay with, if that makes sense. But that's kind of what you can expect at dungeons. Now, when you are at a munch or some kind of meet and greet or a class, it's going to be a different situation. If you're an asexual person and you're going to a munch, I think that is a great place to start. And the reason for that is they're really just like any other normal social gathering. Like, you may talk about more kinky or like fetishy type stuff, but nobody's going to be nude, nobody's going to do anything overtly sexual, nobody's going to use any sexual names or like slap or pinch people's asses. Some munches and some venues may be a little bit different. I've heard a few less than savory tales about that happening, but generally speaking, they're going to be pretty non-sexual, pretty non-threatening. And if what you're interested in is just seeing if this community works for you, definitely head out to a munch first, because I have never experienced anything that's made me uncomfortable as an asexual person. Just going to a munch, going to a class is pretty much the same, unless it's like explicitly said that it's going to be a class where you are trying something out. And even then, a lot of the times, that's not even going to involve taking off clothing. Everyone's going to be clothed. Everyone is, you know, there's not going to be any sexual content to it, unless you're going to something that is sexual, like a fisting class or something along those lines. Everyone's going to stay closed. It's going to be relatively professional, and it's going to be relatively non-threatening. If all you want to do is maybe learn some skills and socialize a little bit, there shouldn't, be a whole lot there as an asexual person that would make you uncomfortable. Now, when it comes to communicating to specific people and talking about your asexuality in terms of a negotiation for a scene, how do you do that? Well, do keep in mind, BDSM is not inherently sexual. Again, if you are somebody who is part of a community where people are lifestylers and they do BDSM as like their big main hobby, more or less, of their lives, sex is not an assumed thing, or at least it shouldn't be. I've heard some tales from some rope tops that have issues around that, so if you're interested in rope bottoming, keep a little bit more of an eye out. But generally speaking, people who are tops or doms in BDSM do not expect you to provide sexual service as part of your submission. And, you know, any side of the slash that you fall on, as a dominant, if you are an asexual dominant, which I'll talk about more a little bit later on, if you're asexual and you're interested in being a dominant or a top, that makes it so much easier for you to be able to say, no, we're not going to do anything sexual. And guess what? They're probably going to be okay with that. And actually the same thing if you're a submissive as well. The first couple times you play with somebody, and possibly the whole time you play, most people don't expect sex. Most people are okay with everybody staying perfectly clothed. People in BDSM are great negotiators. It's so much easier, I think, than being in vanilla culture where people like do this like weird assumption thing and like body language reading and being like, I thought this was the right moment. Is that good enough? No. And especially as an asexual person, it's great to have the negotiation. You can literally print out an entire list, link to my video about yes, no, maybe list down below, and write out every single thing you're not comfortable with, every single thing you are comfortable with. So if you don't want XYZ thing to be touched, if you don't want to see XYZ thing, if you don't want XYZ name to be used or genitals to be referred to in any way, you can totally do that. You have the power, and it is such a great thing to be able to have a relationship negotiated where you have such great, concise, clear expectations about what the sexual content of it is going to be. And if somebody is like, well, actually receiving oral sex is like really important to my play, totally just get to move on, and it's not even a big deal. People will like not hold that against you. It's great. A specific note that I want to make about asexuality and dominance, which I cannot particularly talk about because I am not a dominant. Again, go watch Morgan Thorne's video about asexuality and BDSM because she is a top. So if you want to learn more about that perspective, link down below. I think a lot of people who are asexual may be drawn to BDSM. Going into BDSM as a top or a dominant can be a really great experience for you because, like I talked about during negotiation, you get to really frame everything. You get to frame the sexual encounter. You get to decide exactly, you know, what clothing is worn, how much clothing is removed, what's touched, what's not touched, how long it lasts for, what positions used. Everything can totally be completely controlled. And personally, as an asexual person and in my experience, what I am able to get out of sex in the context of a BDSM relationship is very different than in a vanilla relationship. Because I am a submissive person and I am able to provide sex as a service to my sir, I am able to kind of detach it a lot more from any kind of sexual attraction or like wanting people to like touch me sexually, because it's part of my submission to do that. And as a dominant, you can kind of approach it in a similar way, where it's like you're having power over this person, but maybe aren't necessarily sexually attracted to them or don't want certain things to happen. And it can definitely be a really great thing to do. I would caution, though, strictly getting into BDSM to have sexual control. Very hard to fake being a dom and be good at it. If you're not generally speaking a dominant person or a top person, if you don't already have those inclinations, don't force yourself into that role just because you're asexual and you think it'll give you more control, because that may or may not turn out super well for you. Now, one last thing I want to get to in this video are what kinds of scenes you can engage in as an asexual person. And again, I do emphasize most BDSM play is non-sexual, and I think a lot of people go into BDSM assuming it's all like sex acts, and it's totally not. And you can have casual play between friends, you can have casual play between people who aren't involved in any kind of way, where there's absolutely no sexual content at all. And I know some people who maybe have more fetishes, have things that they need sexually that can be a little bit different, but for the most part, people who engage in BDSM casually or for the first time together aren't expecting anything sexual about it, and the act is not sexual in any way for them. There are a lot of things here. I think service is a great way to start. I have a whole video talking about service if you want to watch that, but that would be things like maybe learning how to shine a pair of shoes, learning how to serve tea or serve a formal dinner. That could be simple as just holding water for somebody while they're flogging another person. You could be human furniture, for example. You could also do things like impact play, which again I think also gets framed as sexual a lot of the times, but not all masochism and not all sadism is sexual. It's definitely very much an endorphin and adrenaline rush, and that may or may not be related to anybody's particular sexual desires at all. So impact play, that would be things like caning, paddling, spanking, whips, punching, anything like that. That can be considered impact play. What kind of impact play you like is going to vary person to person, and different materials and different objects may or may not work out for you. And the last kind of play I recommend for people who are asexual and getting interested in BDSM, I recommend some kind of role play. That could be like pet play, that could be like caregiver and little, that could be something like age play, that could be you know, any kind of role play, any kind of thing you would want to be. That could be, you know, like a police officer and a criminal, that could be a teacher and a student, that could be a lot of different things. There's all kinds of roles you can play with, but there's a lot there that you can do, especially when you're acting as like a non-human animal or as a different age or something that's completely non-sexual and can be very relaxing, very appealing in terms of power exchange, but again, not having any content related to genitals or sexuality. That is all I want to cover in this video. Hopefully you guys found it helpful. I am an asexual person. Obviously, I cannot speak for all asexuals in kink and all of their experiences and all of their desires and everything that's possible here. So don't assume if I haven't mentioned it that I'm excluding it because I don't think it's relevant, or that like it's not like part of asexuality and kink, or something that shouldn't be mentioned or whatever. I just don't have time to talk about all of it. If you guys did find this video helpful, please let me know. Leave a comment down below. Any questions, concerns, video ideas, whatever. Always happy to hear them. If you did like this video and you want to see more, subscribe. If you really like this video, I would highly recommend going to my Patreon. I have a ton of great rewards and coupon codes for my merch store and all of that stuff, so please do check that out. Link will be down in the description box below. And until I see you next time, hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.